The bells above the bakery door chimed softly, and Han Jun's world fractured. He had stepped inside seeking shelter from Seoul's winter rain, nothing more. The scent of warm bread and vanilla wrapped around him like an unwanted memory. Then he saw her. Nia. She stood behind the counter, her back turned, speaking softly to 3 small children seated at a corner table. Her voice, that voice he had tried to forget for 5 years, floated across the quiet space. The children laughed at something she said. One of them, a boy, turned toward the door. Han Jun stopped breathing. The boy's eyes. The shape of his jaw. The way he tilted his head with quiet observation. Nia turned. Their eyes met. The color drained from her face. Han Jun's hand tightened against the doorframe, his wrist tattoo visible beneath his coat sleeve, the symbol of family, legacy, and everything he had sacrificed. 5 years. 5 years of believing she had abandoned him. 5 years of empty silence. Now she stood before him with 3 children who looked exactly his age when photographs captured his childhood. 3 children he had never known existed. Please like, share, and subscribe. Do you think Nia should tell Han Jun the truth about the children, or protect the life she built without him? The rain continued its gentle assault against the bakery windows. Inside, time had stopped. Han Jun remained motionless near the entrance, his dark wool coat dampened at the shoulders, his posture rigidly controlled. Years of discipline kept his expression neutral, but his eyes betrayed him. They moved from Nia's face to the children, then back again, cataloging details with the precision that had made him feared throughout Seoul's underground. Nia's hands trembled slightly as she wiped them against her apron. She recovered quickly, too quickly, and that familiar gesture of composure struck him harder than any words could have. She still masked her fear the same way. "We're closing soon," she said. Her voice carried the professional distance of a shopkeeper addressing an unwelcome customer. Han Jun did not move. "Since when do you close at 3 in the afternoon?" The question hung between them. It revealed too much, that he knew her habits, that he remembered, that he had perhaps been watching without her knowledge. Nia's jaw tightened. "Since I became the owner." Behind her, the 3 children had grown quiet. The boy who had turned first was now studying Han Jun with unsettling intensity. His siblings, 2 girls, whispered to each other, sensing the tension without understanding its source. Han Jun took a single step forward. The movement was measured, deliberate. He had learned long ago that stillness commanded more respect than aggression. "Nia." Her name in his voice after so many years. She flinched. "You should go," she said quietly. "Should I?" He moved closer to the counter, close enough to see the faint lines of exhaustion around her eyes, the way her fingers gripped the edge of the wooden surface. Close enough to smell the familiar warmth of shea butter and something floral, unchanged after all this time. "Mama," one of the girls called out, her voice uncertain. Nia's entire demeanor shifted. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by something fiercer. She turned slightly, positioning her body between Han Jun and the children. "Everything is fine, baby. Finish your snack." Han Jun's gaze flickered to the child who had spoken. She had Nia's full lips, her warm brown skin. But her eyes, those eyes were darker, shaped differently, framed by delicate features that did not belong to Nia's family. They belonged to his. His chest tightened. "Who are they?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. The question was a test, of her honesty, of his own sanity, of the impossible mathematics of time and betrayal. Nia met his stare directly. "They're my children." "Your children?" "Yes." "And their father?" The question landed like a blade between them. Nia's expression flickered, pain, anger, something that might have been grief, before settling into cold neutrality. "That's none of your concern." Han Jun studied her face, searching for the lie. He had spent years reading people, understanding their weaknesses, anticipating their deceptions. But Nia had always been different. She had never feared him the way others did. She had challenged him, softened him, broken him in ways he still did not fully understand. Now she stood before him like a stranger protecting secrets he could not name. Nia. His voice dropped lower. 5 years ago, you disappeared. No letter. No explanation. You left everything behind. Our home, our life, He stopped himself. And now I find you here, in a bakery I've never heard of, with 3 children who... Who what? She interrupted sharply. The children had stopped eating. The boy was watching Han Jun with open suspicion now, his small body tense as though preparing to defend his mother. Han Jun chose his next words carefully. Who look approximately 4 years old. The implication was clear. Nia understood it immediately. 5 years since she vanished. Children who appeared to be 4. The math told a story she clearly did not want him to hear. I think you should leave, she said again, but her voice wavered this time. Han Jun remained still. I'm not leaving until you answer me. You don't have the right to demand answers from me. Not anymore. The words struck deeper than she intended. He felt them settle into the hollow space where their marriage had once lived. I was your husband. Was. She emphasized the past tense like a weapon. You were my husband. And you made your choice. What choice? Her laugh was bitter, hollow. Don't do this, June. Don't stand here pretending you don't remember. I remember everything. His voice hardened. I remember waking up to an empty house. I remember searching for you for months. I remember. You remember what you want to remember. She moved toward the children, gathering their plates with trembling hands. Come on, babies. We're going upstairs. The boy resisted. Mama, who is that man? Han Jun felt the question pierce through him. The child's voice carried an accent, Korean mixed with something else, something that reminded him of the way Nia's mother used to speak during their brief meeting years ago. No one important, Nia answered quickly. Let's go. But the boy continued staring at Han Jun. His gaze traveled to the visible portion of Han Jun's wrist, where the edge of his tattoo peeked beneath his coat sleeve. He has a picture on his hand, the boy observed. Like the one in your box. Nia froze. Han Jun's attention sharpened. What box? Nothing. Nia pulled the boy closer. Seo Jun, we're leaving now. Seo Jun. A Korean name. Given to a child with Nigerian heritage and features that echoed Han Jun's own bloodline. The implications crashed through him like waves against stone. Seo Jun, he repeated slowly, tasting the name. Testing it. Nia's composure finally cracked. Fear surfaced in her eyes. Genuine, desperate fear. Don't, she whispered. That was my grandfather's name. Silence. Heavy and absolute. One of the girls, the smaller one, tugged at Nia's apron. Mama, why are you sad? Nia blinked rapidly, fighting tears that threatened to fall. I'm not sad, Amara. I'm just tired. Let's go upstairs. She herded the children toward a door at the back of the bakery, her movements hurried but controlled. Han Jun watched them disappear through the doorway, 3 small figures with his eyes, his expressions, his legacy, and Nia, who had taken everything from him without ever explaining why. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Han Jun stood alone in the empty bakery, surrounded by the scent of bread and the ghost of a marriage he had believed was dead. Outside, the rain continued falling. Inside his chest, something far more devastating had begun. The penthouse offered no comfort that night. Han Jun stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Seoul residence, watching the city lights blur through sheets of rain. His reflection stared back at him, sharp jaw, controlled expression, the face of a man who commanded empires. But behind that facade, chaos reigned. 3 children. Approximately 4 years old. One named after his grandfather. And Nia who had vanished 5 years ago while he was. He stopped the thought before it could fully form. The memory was too sharp, too loaded with guilt he had spent years suppressing. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. The penthouse was silent except for the soft hum of climate control and the distant rhythm of rain. Luxury surrounded him, Italian furniture, Korean art, the trappings of power and wealth, but it all felt hollow now. For 5 years, he had convinced himself that Nia had left because she wanted to. Because she had grown tired of his world, his family's expectations, the danger that followed him like a shadow. He had told himself that she had chosen to abandon their marriage. But those children, those eyes, if they were his, if she had been pregnant when she disappeared, then everything he believed about that night was wrong. He moved toward his study, his footsteps silent against the marble floors. The room was lined with books he rarely read and photographs he rarely examined. But tonight, he found himself reaching for a particular drawer, one he had not opened in years. Inside lay remnants of his marriage. Their wedding invitation, printed in both Korean and English. A photograph from their honeymoon in Jeju, Nia laughing as wind swept through her hair. A small box containing the ring she had left behind. He picked up the ring. White gold, simple, elegant. He had designed it himself, working with a jeweler for months to create something that matched her understated beauty. She had worn it for 2 years. Then she had vanished, leaving it on their bedroom dresser like a final goodbye. Jun closed his fingers around the ring. The metal was cold against his palm. What had happened that night? The question had haunted him for years, but he had forced himself to bury it. To accept the narrative his family had offered, that Nia had grown overwhelmed by his world, that she had realized she could not handle the weight of being married to a man like him, that she had simply left. But now another possibility emerged. One far more devastating. What if she hadn't left by choice? What if something had driven her away? What if he had been so consumed by other matters that he had missed the most important moment of their lives? His phone buzzed again. This time, he glanced at the screen. Secretary Park, the woman from the Houndy property matter is requesting another meeting. She says it's urgent. Jun's jaw tightened. The woman. Yuna. He deleted the message without responding. Morning arrived with reluctant gray light. Jun had not slept. He stood in his penthouse bathroom, examining his reflection with critical precision. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His usually immaculate appearance showed subtle signs of disruption, a collar not perfectly aligned, a watch placed on the wrong wrist. He corrected these details methodically, restoring the facade of control. Today, he would return to the bakery. The decision had formed somewhere during the sleepless hours. He could not demand answers through force. Not from Nia, not about this. But he could observe. He could investigate. He could piece together the truth she was clearly determined to hide. His driver waited in the underground garage. The black sedan moved through Seoul's morning traffic with practiced efficiency, navigating toward Bukshin Hanok village, where Nia's bakery occupied a renovated traditional building. Jun studied the streets through tinted windows. He had spent years building his empire in this city, legitimate businesses intertwined with darker operations, all controlled through layers of careful management. His family's organization had thrived for 3 generations, and he had expanded it further through strategic alliances and calculated risks. Yet here he was, undone by a small bakery and 3 children he could not stop thinking about. The car stopped 2 blocks from the establishment. Jun stepped out alone, dismissing his driver with a subtle gesture. He wanted no witnesses for this. He approached on foot, his coat collar raised against the lingering cold. The bakery's facade was charming. White walls, traditional Korean roof tiles, a hand-painted sign reading Adara's Kitchen, in both Korean and English. Adara. A name that sounded Nigerian. Nia had built this without him. A business, an identity, a life. Through the front window, he could see her moving behind the counter. The bakery was busier today, a few customers seated at small tables, others waiting in line. Nia smiled at each of them, exchanging pleasantries with easy warmth. She looked different in this context. Softer. More relaxed. The Nia he remembered had often been tense, walking carefully through his world like someone perpetually prepared for danger. She had loved him, he believed that still, but she had never fully trusted the life surrounding him. Perhaps she had been right not to trust it. Jun did not enter immediately. Instead, he found a position across the street, near a traditional tea house with an unobstructed view of the bakery. He waited. For an hour, he observed. Customers came and went. Nia managed the counter with efficient grace, occasionally disappearing through the back door, presumably to check on the children. Around 11, an older Korean woman arrived and took over the counter. Nia removed her apron, exchanging words with her colleague before retreating to the back. Minutes later, she emerged through a side door with the 3 children. Jun's breath caught. In daylight, the resemblance was even more striking. The boy, Jun, carried himself with a seriousness that seemed too old for his years. The taller girl moved with Nia's natural grace. The smaller one bounced between her siblings with infectious energy. They walked together down the cobblestone street, Nia holding the smaller girl's hand while the older 2 stayed close. Jun followed at a distance. He told himself it was investigation. Observation. Nothing more. But watching Nia with those children, watching the way she smiled at them, adjusted their coats, responded to their endless questions, something fundamental shifted inside him. This was not the woman who had abandoned him. This was a mother. Protective, devoted, utterly transformed by love for her children. Their children. He was increasingly certain now. The ages matched. The features matched. Even the name matched. But if they were his children, why had she hidden them? Why had she disappeared without telling him she was pregnant? What had he done that was so unforgivable? The questions burned through him as he watched them enter a small park. The children immediately scattered toward the playground equipment while Nia settled on a bench, her eyes never leaving them. Jun remained hidden among the park's autumn-bare trees, close enough to observe but far enough to avoid detection. Jun climbed the ladder to a slide with careful precision. The taller girl helped her younger sister navigate the steps. Their laughter carried through the cold air, bright, innocent, untouched by the complicated history surrounding their existence. Jun found himself memorizing their voices. This was his legacy. Not the buildings he owned or the empire he controlled. These 3 small humans, growing up without knowing their father existed. You're not as subtle as you think you are. The voice came from behind him. Jun turned sharply, instincts flaring, then stilled. An older Nigerian woman stood several feet away, her posture dignified, her expression knowing. She wore an elegant winter coat over traditional Nigerian fabric, her silver-streaked hair wrapped in a coordinating headscarf. She looked familiar. "Mrs. Adeyemi," he said slowly, recognition dawning. Nia's mother. He had met her only once, at the wedding, but her presence was unmistakable. Jun. Her voice carried the same musical quality as her daughter's, but with sharper edges. "I wondered when you would find her." He studied her carefully. "You knew she was here." "Of course I knew. I helped her build that bakery." Mrs. Adeyemi moved closer, her dark eyes assessing him with maternal protectiveness. "The question is, what do you intend to do now that you've found her?" Jun considered his words. This woman had never approved of him. That much had been clear even during their brief wedding encounter. She had seen through his polished exterior to the danger beneath. "I want answers," he said finally. "Answers." She repeated the word with faint derision. 5 years late, but you want answers. She left without. Without what? Mrs. Adeyemi interrupted. Without giving you the chance to explain? Without accepting your excuses? She stepped closer, her presence somehow more intimidating than men twice her size. "My daughter gave birth alone in a hospital room, with no husband, no support, nothing but the knowledge that the man she loved had abandoned her for another woman." The words struck like physical blows. "That's not what happened." She laughed bitterly. "Tell me, Jun. Where were you on the night of December 15th, 5 years ago? December 15th. The date surfaced through years of suppressed memory. He remembered that night, a critical meeting, complications with a business arrangement, his father demanding his presence at. And Yuna. Yuna had been there. A strategic introduction arranged by his family. A potential alliance through marriage that his father had been pressing for months. Jun had attended the dinner. He had been photographed with Yuna. The images had appeared in society columns, suggesting an intimacy that did not exist. But where had Nia been? He realized with sickening clarity that he did not know. He had been so consumed by family obligations, by the performance his father demanded, that he had not thought to check on his wife. His pregnant wife. She was, he started, in labor. Mrs. Adeyemi's voice broke slightly. She was in labor, alone, trying to reach you. Calling your phone. Calling your office. Calling everyone who might know where you were. Jun's chest constricted. No one answered. No one helped her. Mrs. Adeyemi's composure cracked, revealing the grief beneath. She delivered 3 babies in a hospital surrounded by strangers. And when she finally saw the photographs, you with that woman, smiling like you hadn't a care in the world while your wife was bringing your children into the world alone, something inside her died. The truth crashed through him like a wave of ice water. He had missed the birth. He had been performing for his father, attending to appearances, while Nia. I didn't know, he said, and his voice sounded foreign to his own ears. I didn't know she was in labor. I didn't. You didn't ask. Mrs. Adeyemi cut him off without mercy. You didn't pay attention. You were so busy maintaining your precious image that you forgot you had a wife at home, 9 months pregnant with your children. Behind them, children's laughter continued to ring through the park. Jun could not bring himself to turn around, to look at the evidence of his failure. She tried to tell you afterward, Mrs. Adeyemi continued, her voice quieter now. She tried to reach you for weeks. But you were always unavailable. Always busy. And those photographs kept appearing. You and that woman at events, at dinners, in private cars. There was nothing between us, Jun said urgently. Yuna was. My father was trying to arrange. I never. It doesn't matter what the truth was. Mrs. Adeyemi shook her head. It matters what Nia saw. What she experienced. She believed you had replaced her. Moved on before your children were even born. Jun stood frozen, the weight of revelation crushing him. All these years, he had believed Nia left because she wanted to. Because she couldn't handle his world, his family, the shadows that followed him. Instead, she had left because she believed he had abandoned her first. Because he had abandoned her first, not intentionally, not romantically, but through neglect. Through prioritizing appearances over his marriage. Through failing to be present when she needed him most. Those children, he managed. They're your children. Mrs. Adeyemi confirmed what he already knew. Seojun, Amara, and Zara. Named for your grandfather and her grandmothers. 3 names. 3 children. 3 lives he had missed entirely. Jun's legs threatened to buckle. He forced himself to remain standing through sheer willpower. I want to know them, he said. That's not your decision to make. They're my children. And Nia is their mother. Mrs. Adeyemi's voice hardened again. She has raised them alone for 4 years. Built a life for them. Protected them from a world that would have consumed them. You don't get to walk back in and claim them like possessions. I'm not. You're a powerful man, Jun. I know exactly what you're capable of. She held his gaze without flinching. If you try to take those children from my daughter, I will personally ensure that every secret your family has buried comes to light. Do you understand me? The threat was delivered with the calm certainty of someone who had nothing left to lose. Jun understood perfectly. I don't want to take them, he said quietly. I want to know them. There's a difference. Mrs. Adeyemi studied him for a long moment. Whatever she saw in his expression seemed to give her pause. Then prove it, she said finally. Prove that you've changed. Prove that you're capable of being the father those children deserve. She turned to leave, then paused. And stay away from my daughter until you're certain you won't break her again. She's survived enough. She walked away, leaving Han Jun standing among the bare trees. In the distance, his children played without knowing he existed. And he understood with devastating clarity that earning the right to know them would require more than money, power, or influence. It would require becoming someone worthy of their love. 3 days passed. Han Jun did not return to the bakery. Instead, he did something he had not done in years. He investigated himself. His office at Han Corporation occupied the top floor of a glass tower in Gangnam. The space reflected his personality. Minimalist design, expensive materials, everything in its proper place. But today, the order felt oppressive. He sat at his desk, reviewing documents his assistant had gathered at his request. Meeting schedules from 5 years ago. Photographs from that period. His own calendar entries, stripped of security protocols and laid bare. The evidence was damning. December 15th had been packed with appointments. A morning meeting with potential investors. Lunch with his father to discuss family matters. A phrase that Han Jun now understood as code for the arranged marriage his father had been orchestrating. And in the evening, the dinner with Yuna. He had not wanted to attend. He remembered that clearly now. The reluctance, the irritation at his father's persistent pressure. But he had gone anyway, because defying his father carried consequences he had not been willing to face. Meanwhile, his wife had been alone. He pulled up his phone records from that night. 17 missed calls from Nia. 8 voicemails he had never listened to. A text that read simply, "Please come. I need you." He had seen none of them. His phone had been with his assistant during the dinner, a security precaution his father insisted upon during important meetings. By the time he retrieved his phone, Nia's calls had stopped. He had assumed she was sleeping. He had gone home expecting to find her in bed, perhaps slightly annoyed at his late return. Instead, he had found an empty house. No note. No explanation. Just absence. In the chaos that followed, the search for her, the private investigators, the pressure from his family to move forward, he had never thought to check hospital records. Never thought to consider that she might have been in labor. Why would he? She had not been due for another 2 weeks. Everything had seemed fine when he left that morning. But everything had not been fine. He understood that now. Nia had been struggling through the final weeks of a difficult pregnancy while he focused on business deals and family obligations. She had been alone in a house that was never truly hers, surrounded by staff who reported to his mother, isolated from the man who should have been her partner. He had failed her long before December 15th. That night had simply been the breaking point. His office door opened. Secretary Park entered with practiced discretion, carrying a folder. "The information you requested about the bakery," Park said, placing the folder on Han Jun's desk. "Thank you." Park hesitated. "Sir, I should mention, there have been inquiries." Han Jun looked up. "What kind of inquiries?" "About your whereabouts recently. Your mother's staff has noticed changes in your routine." Park's expression remained neutral, but his meaning was clear. Han Jun's mother was watching. This was not surprising. Madame Han had always maintained careful surveillance of her son's activities. She had opposed his marriage to Nia from the beginning, a foreign woman, a commoner, someone who would dilute the family bloodline. When Nia disappeared, his mother had barely concealed her satisfaction. If she discovered the existence of 3 grandchildren, children with mixed heritage, children who represented everything she had tried to prevent, her response would be severe. "Tell anyone who asks that I've been handling property investments," Han Jun said calmly. "Nothing worth their attention." "Yes, sir." Park departed, leaving Han Jun alone with the folder and his thoughts. He opened it slowly. Inside was a comprehensive report on Adora's kitchen. Financial records, supplier contracts, lease agreements. Nia had built the business methodically, growing it from a small market stall into a respected establishment with loyal clientele. She had done this while raising 3 children alone. The realization humbled him in ways he had not expected. Among the documents was a copy of the children's birth certificates. He had not asked for these specifically. Park had excellent instincts about what information his employer needed. Hon Jun stared at the papers for a long moment before reading them. Hon Seo Jun. Born December 15, 2019. Hon Amara. Born December 15, 2019. Hon Zara. Born December 15, 2019. Hon. She had given them his family name. Despite everything, despite believing he had abandoned her, despite raising them alone, despite building a life specifically designed to exclude him, she had still named them as his children. Something cracked inside his chest. A week later, Hon Jun returned to the bakery. He did not enter through the front this time. Instead, he approached through the rear alley, timing his arrival for the quiet hour after lunch when customer traffic slowed. Nia was alone in the kitchen, visible through a small window. She moved with practiced efficiency, kneading dough while something fragrant baked in the ovens behind her. Hon Jun knocked on the back door. The movement inside stopped. Through the window, he saw Nia tense, her expression wary. "It's me," he called softly. A long pause. Then footsteps, and the door opened a few inches. Nia's face appeared in the gap. "I told you to leave." "I know." "Then why are you here?" Hon Jun studied her through the narrow opening. The guarded eyes, the defensive posture, the exhaustion she could not quite hide. She was beautiful still, perhaps more beautiful than he remembered. Motherhood had added something to her presence, a strength, a depth. "I spoke with your mother," he said. The wariness intensified. "She told me." "Then you know that I know." He kept his voice even. "About the children. About that night. About what I failed to do." Nia's jaw tightened. "Knowing doesn't change anything." "Perhaps not." He paused. "But I'm hoping it might be a beginning." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "A beginning? After 5 years?" "I'm not asking you to forgive me, Nia. Not yet. Maybe not ever." He held her gaze steadily. "I'm asking for the chance to understand what happened. And to find a way forward." "Forward?" Her voice rose slightly. "There is no forward. I have built a life here, a good life, and I will not let you destroy it." "I don't want to destroy anything." "Then what do you want?" The question hung between them. Hon Jun considered his answer carefully, knowing that whatever he said next would shape everything that followed. "I want to know my children," he said finally. "I want to understand why you left. And," he paused, something vulnerable surfacing in his voice, "I want to understand what I became that made leaving feel like your only choice." Nia stared at him. For a moment, her defensive armor seemed to waver, revealing the woman he remembered beneath, the woman who had once looked at him with love rather than fear. Then the armor returned. "The children don't know about you," she said quietly. "As far as they understand, their father is simply absent. I've never told them details. Never made you into a villain or a hero. Just someone who isn't here. I want to change that. You can't just appear in their lives and demand a place." Her voice cracked slightly. "They're not bargaining chips or possessions. They're children. My children. And they've spent 4 years without a father because..." She stopped, composing herself with visible effort. "Because of me," Hon Jun finished for her. "I know." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Nia stepped back, opening the door slightly wider. "One conversation. That's all I'm offering. No promises, no guarantees, no," she gestured vaguely. "No whatever you're planning." "I'm not planning anything." You're always planning something. That's who you are. The observation stung because it was accurate. Hon-jun stepped inside the kitchen. The warmth wrapped around him, fragrant with bread and spices. Traditional Korean shelves held Nigerian pottery and Korean ceramics in harmonious arrangement. Nia had built this space. Every detail reflected her, the fusion of cultures, the careful beauty, the warmth she had always carried inside her. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a small table near the window. "I'll finish this batch and then we can talk." Hon-jun sat and waited. For the first time in years, he was in no hurry. The conversation that followed was not easy. Nia continued working as she spoke, her hands occupied with dough while her voice carried the weight of years. She told him about the pregnancy, how difficult the final months had been, how isolated she had felt in his family's world. She told him about December 15th. The contractions had started early that morning. She had tried to reach him, but his phone had gone to voicemail. She had called his office, but his assistant had explained that he was unavailable. In meetings all day, very important, cannot be disturbed. She had driven herself to the hospital. Alone. The labor had been complicated. Triplets carried higher risks. The medical team had managed the situation professionally, but Nia had faced it without any support. Afterward, lying in her hospital bed with 3 newborns, she had turned on the television to distract herself. The entertainment news had been covering Hon-jun's family, specifically, the dinner he had attended with Yuna. Photographs showed them together, smiling, his hand on her lower back in a gesture of intimacy. The news anchor had speculated about an upcoming engagement announcement. Nia's voice remained steady as she described this, but Hon-jun saw her hands tremble slightly against the dough. "I tried to call you the next day," she continued. "And the day after. For 2 weeks, I tried to reach you. But every time I called, someone told me you were busy. With meetings. With your family. With," she paused. "With her. Nia. I saw the photographs." Her voice hardened. "I saw how you looked at her. How you smiled. I had never seen you smile like that. Not in years anyway." Hon-jun closed his eyes. Those smiles were performance. Everything about those events was performance. "But you performed for her. For your family. For appearances." Nia finally stopped working, turning to face him directly. "You never performed for me. You never pretended for me. And somehow that made it worse. Because it meant that everything you showed her, the charm, the warmth, the attentiveness, you were capable of it. You just didn't think I was worth the effort." The accusation struck deep because it contained truth. He had never been charming with Nia. He had simply been himself, controlled, serious, emotionally distant. He had believed that honesty was enough. He had not understood that she needed more than honesty. She needed presence, attention, the effort of being truly seen. "I didn't," he started. "You didn't know." She finished for him. "That's what you're going to say. You didn't know I was in labor. You didn't know the photos would be published. You didn't know how much I was struggling. I should have known." Yes. Her agreement was simple and devastating. "You should have." He sat with that truth, letting it settle into his bones. "I left because I believed I had already lost you," Nia said quietly. "The man I married, the man who promised me partnership and loyalty, he was gone. Replaced by someone who cared more about appearances and family obligations than about me. I didn't leave out of spite or cruelty. I left because I didn't believe you wanted me anymore. I never stopped wanting you. Then why didn't you fight for me?" Her voice broke completely. "Why didn't you look for me? Why didn't you find me?" Hon-jun's jaw tightened. "I did look for you. I searched for months. Your investigators couldn't find a Nigerian woman running a bakery in Seoul?" She laughed bitterly. "Forgive me if I find that difficult to believe." The accusation struck him silent. Because she was right. His investigators had been thorough. If they had truly wanted to find her, they would have succeeded. Which meant someone had interfered. Someone had ensured that their reports led nowhere. Someone in his family. The realization surfaced slowly, like a body rising from deep water. I didn't know, he repeated, but this time the words carried different weight. I didn't know they were hiding you from me. Nia frowned. What do you mean? My family. My mother, most likely. He met her eyes. She opposed our marriage from the beginning. When you disappeared, she told me you had left willingly, that she had seen it coming, that foreign wives were never suited to our world. His voice hardened with growing anger. I believed her. I shouldn't have, but I did. And then the months passed, and the investigation reports showed nothing, and You gave up. The accusation landed between them. Yes, he admitted. I gave up. Because I believed you wanted me to. Nia stared at him. Behind her eyes, something shifted, a recalculation, a reassessment of the story she had believed for 5 years. Your mother, she said slowly. She came to the hospital. Jun went still. What? 2 days after the birth. She came to see me. Nia's expression grew distant, remembering. She told me that you had made your choice. That you were planning to announce your engagement to Yuna. That if I contested the divorce, she would ensure I never saw the children again. Rage flooded through Jun, cold, controlled, lethal. His mother had threatened her, had lied to her, had manipulated the entire situation to separate them. I never planned to marry Yuna, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I never agreed to any engagement. My father was pressuring me, but I refused. I always refused. Nia's composure finally cracked. Tears formed in her eyes, the first he had seen since their reunion. She said you had already signed the divorce papers. I never signed anything. She showed me documents. Forged. His voice hardened. Whatever she showed you was forged. I never divorced you, Nia. As far as the legal system is concerned, we are still married. The revelation hung in the air between them. Still married. After 5 years of separation, 3 children raised without him, an entire life built on the assumption that he had abandoned her, they were still legally husband and wife. Nia sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. 5 years, she whispered. I spent 5 years believing you chose her. Believing you wanted the divorce. Believing everything your mother told me. Jun moved toward her slowly, kneeling beside her chair. He did not touch her, he had not earned that right, but he remained close, his presence an offer of support she could accept or reject. I'm sorry, he said. I should have fought harder. I should have questioned the reports, challenged my mother, done everything differently. But I can't change what happened. I can only, he paused, searching for words. I can only try to make it right now. Nia lowered her hands. Her eyes were red, but her expression had shifted, no longer purely defensive, but something more complex. The children, she said quietly. I want to know them. If you'll allow it. They don't understand any of this. They're 4 years old. She shook her head. They deserve better than to become pawns in whatever battle you're about to fight with your family. This isn't about my family. It will be. Once your mother discovers. Let me worry about my mother. Nia studied him. Whatever she saw in his expression seemed to satisfy her, at least partially. Slowly, she said finally. If you want to know them, it has to be slow. Careful. No sudden appearances. No overwhelming gestures. They need time to understand who you are. However you want to handle it. And your mother? Jun's expression hardened. She will never threaten you again. I promise you that. The promise carried weight. Nia recognized it, the voice of a man accustomed to making guarantees he could keep. 1 step at a time, she said. That's all I can offer right now. Jun nodded. one step at a time. Outside, the winter afternoon continued its grey descent. Inside the warm kitchen, something fragile began to rebuild. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of trust. It was a beginning. 3 weeks later, Han Jun stood in his mother's formal sitting room. The evidence of her deception spread across the table between them. Madame Han regarded the documents with cold composure. I did what was necessary to protect this family. You destroyed my marriage. You hid my children from me. Children with mixed blood. Children who would have weakened our position. Her voice carried no remorse. You should be thanking me. Before Han Jun could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from Secretary Park. Urgent. The woman from Houndy, Yuna, is at the bakery. She's asking for Nia specifically. Han Jun's blood turned to ice. His mother smiled, a thin, knowing smile. Did you really think I would let you rebuild what I worked so hard to destroy? Han Jun did not remember leaving his mother's house. One moment he stood frozen in her sitting room, her cold smile burning into his memory. The next, he was in his car, his driver navigating Seoul's evening traffic with dangerous speed. His phone pressed against his ear. Secretary Park's voice came through in controlled fragments. She arrived approximately 15 minutes ago. She asked to speak with the owner personally. My contact inside reports that she's still there. The children. Unknown. The bakery appeared busy when she entered. Han Jun's grip tightened on the phone until his knuckles whitened. Yuna at the bakery. Asking for Nia specifically. This was not coincidence. His mother had orchestrated this, had waited until Han Jun was occupied confronting her before sending Yuna to deliver whatever poison she had prepared. How far? He demanded. 12 minutes in current traffic. Too long. Find another route. The car accelerated through a yellow light, weaving between vehicles. Han Jun forced himself to breathe, to think, to plan. Panic would accomplish nothing. But beneath his controlled exterior, fear coiled like a living thing. He had only just begun rebuilding trust with Nia. 3 weeks of careful progress, brief visits to the bakery, supervised conversations, the slow process of proving himself worthy of her consideration. 3 weeks of watching his children from careful distance, learning their personalities, memorizing their laughter. And now his mother had sent the one person capable of destroying everything. Yuna stood near the bakery counter, her designer coat perfectly tailored, her posture elegant and assured. She was beautiful. Nia acknowledged this objectively. The kind of beauty that photographed well, that commanded attention, that had once appeared in every society column beside Han Jun's face. The kind of beauty that had haunted Nia's nightmares for 5 years. I apologize for arriving without notice, Yuna said. Her Korean was refined, her smile practiced. I've heard wonderful things about this establishment. I wanted to see it for myself. Nia's hands remained steady as she arranged pastries in the display case. The children were upstairs with her assistant, safe, unaware. Whatever this woman wanted, they would not be involved. We're open to all customers, Nia replied evenly. Is there something specific you'd like to try? Yuna's smile flickered, a brief crack in the polished facade. Actually, I was hoping we might speak privately. Woman to woman. I'm working. It won't take long. The words carried an undertone of insistence that Nia recognized. This woman was accustomed to getting what she wanted. People rarely told her no. But Nia had spent 5 years building a life specifically designed to resist people like this. If you're here about Han Jun, Nia said quietly, there's nothing to discuss. Yuna's expression sharpened. So you do know who I am. I know what you looked like in photographs 5 years ago. Nia met her gaze directly. I know what his family wanted you to become. Beyond that, you're a stranger to me. The words landed with more impact than Nia intended. Yuna's composure wavered, something raw surfacing briefly before she controlled it. I'm not your enemy, Yuna said, her voice dropping. Whatever you believe about me, about what happened back then, I'm not the villain in this story. I haven't assigned roles to anyone. Haven't you? Yuna moved closer, her voice barely above a whisper. I saw how you looked at me when I entered. You've spent years imagining me as the woman who stole your husband. The mistress who destroyed your marriage. Nia's jaw tightened. Did you? Did I what? Destroy my marriage? The question hung between them, sharp, dangerous, demanding honesty. Yuna was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried unexpected weariness. I was 23 years old when Madame Han approached my family about an arrangement. I had never met Han Jun. I knew nothing about his marriage except what his mother told me, that it was failing, that his wife was unsuitable, that the divorce was already being finalized. She paused, something vulnerable flickering across her features. I believed her. I was young, ambitious, flattered by the attention of such a powerful family. I attended the dinners she arranged. I posed for the photographs she orchestrated. I played the role she assigned me without understanding that I was being used as a weapon against someone I had never met. Nia studied her carefully. The words sounded genuine, but 5 years of survival had taught her to be cautious with trust. And now? She asked. Now I'm 33 years old, unmarried, and finally wise enough to recognize when I've been manipulated. Yuna's smile turned bitter. Madame Han discarded me the moment I stopped being useful. She found other potential candidates, younger and more compliant. I became an embarrassment, the failed arrangement that couldn't secure her son's obedience. Why are you telling me this? Because she's planning something. Yuna's voice dropped further, urgent now. She contacted me last week for the first time in years. She wanted to know if I would be willing to rekindle the connection. Those were her exact words. Rekindle the connection. Nia's stomach turned. And you agreed? I told her I would consider it. I wanted to understand what she was planning. Yuna glanced toward the bakery windows, as though checking for surveillance. She mentioned you. Not by name, she never uses names. But she said her son had developed an unfortunate attachment that needed to be addressed. She said there were complications. Children. The word struck Nia like a physical blow. Madame Han knew about the children. I came here to warn you, Yuna continued. Whatever progress you've made with Han Jun, whatever you're building with him, she will do everything in her power to destroy it. Not because she hates you personally, but because she cannot allow her son to choose anyone but who she selects. Nia's mind raced through implications. Her hands, which had remained steady throughout the conversation, began to tremble slightly. Why warn me? She asked. What do you gain from this? Yuna's expression softened into something almost like respect. I gain nothing except the satisfaction of finally making my own choice. 4 years, I did what powerful people told me to do. I became who they wanted me to be. But I'm finished with that now. She reached into her coat and withdrew a small envelope. These are copies of documents I found in my father's study. Correspondence between him and Madame Han from 5 years ago. They prove that your separation was orchestrated, that the photographs, the timing, the forged divorce papers, all of it was planned months before your children were born. Nia stared at the envelope without reaching for it. Why would your father be involved? Business. Yuna's voice carried old bitterness. An alliance between our families would have been profitable. He saw me as a transaction, not a daughter. Madame Han offered him access to Han Corporation's shipping contracts in exchange for my participation. The revelation added another layer to the betrayal. Not just Han Jun's mother, but multiple families working together to dismantle her marriage. Nia had never stood a chance. Take them, Yuna said, pressing the envelope forward. Show them to Han Jun. Let him see exactly how thoroughly his family manipulated both of you. Before Nia could respond, the bakery door opened with its familiar chime. Han Jun stood in the entrance, his expression controlled but his eyes burning with barely contained fury. His gaze moved from Nia to Yuna, then back again, assessing the situation with predatory intensity. Yuna, he said. Her name in his voice carried no warmth. You shouldn't be here. Yuna turned to face him, her composure intact. I came to deliver something your wife deserves to see. Don't worry, I was just leaving. She moved toward the door, pausing beside Han Jun for a brief moment. Your mother sent me here hoping I would cause destruction, she said quietly. Instead, I chose to offer truth. Perhaps that means I've finally grown up. She departed without looking back, leaving Han Jun and Nia alone in the bakery. The silence that followed felt weighted with significance. What did she give you? Han Jun asked finally, his eyes on the envelope still in Nia's hands. Evidence. Nia's voice was steady, but her hands continued trembling. Proof of what your family did. What they planned. How thoroughly they destroyed us. Han Jun moved closer, his expression shifting from controlled fury to something more vulnerable. I confronted my mother tonight, he said. Before I knew Yuna was here. I showed her everything I had discovered. The forged documents, the manipulated investigations, the lies she told you in the hospital. What did she say? She admitted all of it. His voice hardened. She felt no remorse. She believed she was protecting the family, protecting me, from an unsuitable alliance. Nia laughed bitterly. An unsuitable alliance. Is that what our marriage was? To her, yes. Han Jun stopped within arm's reach, his presence radiating controlled intensity. But not to me. Never to me. He reached out, his fingers hovering near her hand without making contact. An offer rather than a demand. Let me see what she gave you. Nia handed him the envelope. She watched as he opened it, as his eyes moved across the documents inside. Watched his expression transform from controlled attention to something darker, a cold fury that seemed to reshape his entire presence. Bank transfers, he said finally, his voice dangerously quiet. Coordinated communications. A detailed timeline of how they planned to separate us. My mother, Yuna's father, 3 members of my own organization. He looked up, meeting Nia's eyes. This was never about you being unsuitable. This was about control. My mother cannot tolerate anything she doesn't control, including my choices, my heart, my life. What are you going to do? The question hung between them. Nia saw him calculating, weighing options with the precision that had made him powerful. But she also saw something else beneath the calculation, something wounded and determined. I'm going to end her influence, he said. Permanently. The confrontation with Madame Han came 3 days later. It took place in the formal boardroom of Han Corporation's headquarters, neutral territory where family dynamics intersected with business authority. Han Jun had spent 72 hours preparing, gathering allies, ensuring that what happened in this room would be irreversible. Madame Han entered with her usual imperial dignity, her silver hair perfectly arranged, her hanbok traditional and elegant. She regarded the assembled executives, 8 men and 2 women who represented Han Corporation's senior leadership, with the composed assurance of someone who had dominated this world for decades. Then she saw the documents spread across the conference table, and her composure flickered. Han Jun. Her voice carried careful warning. Whatever this theatrical display is meant to accomplish. This is not theater, mother. Han Jun rose from his seat at the head of the table, his presence commanding the room. This is accountability. He gestured to the documents. These represent evidence of criminal interference in my personal life. Forged legal documents. Bribery of investigators. Conspiracy to commit fraud. All orchestrated by you, with the cooperation of external partners. Madame Han's expression hardened. You would humiliate your own mother before the board? Over what? Some foreign woman who? Over my wife, Han Jun interrupted sharply. The mother of my children. The woman you systematically destroyed because she didn't fit your vision of what a Han bride should be. Murmurs rippled through the assembled executives. Several exchanged glances, their expressions reflecting various degrees of discomfort and calculation. You have no proof of anything, Madame Han said coldly. I have comprehensive proof. Han Jun lifted a folder and placed it before her. Bank records, correspondence, testimony from 3 former staff members who participated in your schemes and have now agreed to cooperate with investigators. Investigators. For the first time, genuine alarm crossed her features. You wouldn't dare involve authorities in family matters. I would dare anything to protect my family. Han Jun's voice dropped, cold and absolute. The real family, my wife and my children, not this institution you've spent decades corrupting. The room fell silent. Even the executives who had remained loyal to Madame Han seemed uncertain now, watching the confrontation with wary attention. You have 2 options, Han Jun continued. Voluntary retirement from all positions of influence within the organization, with a comfortable settlement that allows you to live privately without interference. Or, he paused deliberately, I proceed with formal legal action, and your involvement in these matters becomes public knowledge. You would destroy your own family's reputation? I would destroy your power over my life. His expression remained implacable. The reputation survives either way. The only question is whether you survive with it. Madame Han stared at her son with an expression that mingled fury with something almost like respect. You've become ruthless, she observed quietly. I learned from you. The silence stretched between them, mother and son, bound by blood and separated by choices that could never be unmade. Finally, Madame Han gathered the documents he had placed before her and rose from her chair. You will regret this, she said, her voice carrying decades of wounded pride. When that woman disappoints you, when her children prove inadequate, you will remember what you destroyed today. Perhaps, Han Jun replied evenly. But at least the destruction will be my choice, not yours. Madame Han departed without another word, her imperial dignity intact even in defeat. Han Jun remained standing as the door closed behind her, his expression controlled but his hands trembling slightly where no one could see. He had severed himself from his mother's control. Now he had to prove that freedom was worth the cost. The weeks that followed were quieter than Han Jun expected. His mother retreated to the family estate in Gyeonggi province, surrounded by loyal staff but stripped of organizational authority. The board, after reviewing the evidence Han Jun had presented, unanimously supported his continued leadership and declined to interfere in what they termed family matters. Han Corporation continued operating smoothly. The shadow organization his grandfather had built, the darker side of the family legacy, accepted Han Jun's authority without challenge. His reputation for calculated precision had served him well throughout this transition. But the most significant changes happened in the small bakery in Bukshan Hanok village. Han Jun visited daily now, though always during hours when customer traffic was light. He sat at the same corner table, ordering coffee he rarely finished, watching Nia work while the children played in the apartment above. Slowly, carefully, she allowed him closer. First, she let him observe the children through the kitchen window while she described their personalities. How Seo Jun approached everything with serious deliberation, how Amara loved music and dancing, how Zara collected small treasures and hid them in secret places throughout the bakery. Then, she allowed him to be present while the children ate their afternoon snacks, close enough to hear their conversations, too new to participate directly. Finally, on a gray February afternoon, she invited him to join them at the table. Children, Nia said, her voice carefully neutral. This is Mr. Han. He's a friend of Mama's. From a long time ago. 3 pairs of eyes examined him with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. Seo Jun spoke first. You came to the bakery before. When Mama looked scared. Han Jun felt the observation cut through him. His son, had noticed Nia's fear. Had remembered it. Had connected it to him. I did, he acknowledged. I was someone Mama hadn't seen in a long time. Sometimes seeing people from the past can be surprising. Good surprising or bad surprising? Amara asked, her voice musical. I think, Honjun paused, choosing his words with care. I think it was complicated surprising. The kind where you're not sure yet whether it's good or bad. Zara, the smallest, had been studying him with concentrated attention. Now she pointed at his wrist. You have a picture, she observed. On your hand. Like in Mama's special box. Honjun's breath caught. The tattoo. The child remembered her earlier observation from their first encounter. He glanced at Nia, silently asking permission. She gave a slight nod. Slowly, Honjun pulled back his sleeve, revealing the full design. Traditional Korean symbols for family, legacy, and silent strength, rendered in precise black ink. It's called a tattoo, he explained. It's a kind of permanent drawing. This design represents family. Why do you have it on your hand? Seojun asked. So I never forget what matters most. Honjun met his son's eyes. Family is something you carry with you always. Even when you're far away from the people you love. The children considered this explanation with the serious attention that only young children could manage. Mama has a picture like that, Zara announced. She keeps it in her special box. She looks at it sometimes when she thinks we're sleeping. Nia's expression flickered, a moment of vulnerability quickly suppressed. Honjun understood without asking. She had kept something, a photograph, perhaps, connected to him. Connected to the life they had shared before everything fell apart. Maybe Mama can show you the picture sometime, he said carefully. When she's ready. Nia's eyes met his across the table, carrying a message that words could not fully express. Not yet. But perhaps soon. March arrived with unexpected warmth, and with it, an invitation Honjun had not anticipated. Nia's mother, Mrs. Adeyemi, had returned to Seoul. She appeared at the bakery on a Tuesday morning, her presence commanding despite her modest stature. Traditional Nigerian fabric wrapped elegantly around her form, silver bracelets chiming softly at her wrists. She found Honjun seated at his usual table and settled across from him without invitation. You've kept your promises so far, she observed. Nia tells me you've been patient, respectful, present without being overwhelming. I've tried to be. Trying is not the same as succeeding. Mrs. Adeyemi's gaze was penetrating. But I suppose it's a beginning. She signaled to one of the bakery staff for tea, then turned her full attention back to Honjun. I came to deliver an invitation. My family in Lagos is holding a celebration next month. My mother's 80th birthday. Nia had planned to attend with the children. She paused meaningfully. Under the circumstances, she's asked me to determine whether you should be included. Honjun absorbed the implications carefully. An invitation to meet Nia's extended family. To enter the Nigerian side of his children's heritage. To be assessed by an entire community who had surely heard unflattering stories about the man who had abandoned their daughter. I would be honored, he said. You would be scrutinized, Mrs. Adeyemi corrected. My family is not impressed by wealth or power. They will judge you by how you treat Nia, how you interact with the children, how you carry yourself when you have no authority over your surroundings. I understand. Do you? She leaned forward slightly. In Korea, you are Honjun, the silent wolf of Seoul, commander of an empire, feared and respected. In Lagos, you will be nothing but a stranger who hurt my daughter. Every uncle, every cousin, every grandmother with a sharp tongue will be watching for reasons to reject you. Honjun met her gaze without flinching. Then I will give them no reasons. Mrs. Adeyemi studied him for a long moment. Whatever she saw in his expression seemed to satisfy her, though her approval remained guardedly withheld. The flight leaves in 3 weeks, she said finally. I suggest you prepare yourself. Nigerian families are not gentle with men who have disappointed their daughters. She rose, gathered her tea, and departed without further pleasantries. Jun remained seated, contemplating the challenge before him. For the first time in years, he would enter a world where his name carried no weight, where his power meant nothing, where he would be judged solely on his character and his treatment of the woman he was still learning to deserve. The prospect was terrifying. It was also, he realized, exactly what he needed. The preparations for Lagos consumed the following weeks. Jun approached the journey with the same methodical precision he applied to business negotiations, researching Nigerian culture, learning basic Yoruba phrases, understanding the family dynamics Nia quietly explained during their evening conversations. These conversations had become a nightly ritual. After the bakery closed and the children were in bed, Nia would make tea and they would sit together in the small apartment above the shop, talking through the distance that still remained between them. She told him about her childhood in Lagos, the sprawling family compound, the aunties who cooked enormous meals, the uncles who argued about football with passionate intensity. She described her grandmother, whose 80th birthday they would celebrate, as a woman of formidable presence who had raised 7 children while running a successful textile business. "She'll see through you immediately," Nia warned. "Grandmother has no patience for pretense. If you try to perform for her, she'll know." "What should I do instead?" "Be honest." Nia's expression softened slightly. "She respects honesty more than charm. If you've made mistakes, and you have, admit them. If you're uncertain about something, and you will be, ask questions. She despises men who pretend to know everything." Jun absorbed these instructions carefully, understanding that he was receiving a guide to survival rather than mere travel advice. The children, meanwhile, seemed increasingly comfortable with his presence. Jun had begun asking him questions about Korea, about the buildings he owned, the cars he drove, the work that kept him busy during the days. Amara had discovered that Jun could sing traditional Korean children's songs and demanded performances with increasing frequency. Zora, the observer, had taken to leaving small treasures at his place at the table. A pretty stone, a folded paper crane, a fallen leaf with interesting patterns. Each gift was a test. Jun knew this instinctively. The child was assessing whether he paid attention, whether he valued what she offered, whether he was worthy of her trust. He kept every treasure carefully, storing them in a small box in his penthouse, a collection of offerings from a daughter who did not yet know what he was to her. The question of revelation hung over everything. When would they tell the children the truth? How would they explain the complicated history? What words could possibly make sense to 4-year-old minds? Nia had not yet decided. Jun did not pressure her. But the question grew more urgent with each passing day. Lagos arrived in a wave of heat, color, and overwhelming sensation. Jun had traveled extensively throughout his career: Tokyo, Singapore, New York, London, but nothing had prepared him for the vibrant chaos of Nigeria's largest city. The airport swarmed with people. The air was thick with humidity and unfamiliar scents. Music seemed to pulse from everywhere simultaneously: car radios, shop speakers, street performers with drums and guitars. The children navigated the chaos with easy familiarity, guided by their grandmother and a swarm of relatives who had gathered to welcome them. Jun followed at a careful distance, absorbing the environment while trying not to appear overwhelmed. Nia's cousin Emeka, a large, cheerful man with a booming laugh, had apparently been assigned to manage Jun's introduction to the family. "So you're the famous Korean husband," Emeka said, his English heavily accented but fluent. "We've heard many stories about you. Not all of them flattering." "I imagine not." Emeka laughed. "I like that you don't make excuses. Most men would already be defending themselves." "Would defending myself change the stories?" "No. But it would tell us something about your character." Emeka clapped him on the shoulder with enough force to stagger him slightly. "Come. The elders are waiting. Better not to keep them waiting longer than necessary." The family compound was exactly as Nia had described, a sprawling collection of buildings surrounding a central courtyard, filled with relatives of every generation. Children ran freely between structures. Elderly women sat in shaded areas, fanning themselves and observing everything with sharp attention. Men gathered in clusters, their conversations animated with gestures and laughter. Han Jun felt utterly exposed. In Seoul, he moved through spaces that he controlled. People deferred to him. His presence commanded automatic respect. Here, he was nobody, a foreign stranger who had hurt one of their own. The elders were waiting in the main house, a group of 7 men and women who represented the family's senior generation. Grandmother Adeyemi sat in the central position, her silver hair wrapped in an elaborate geli headwrap, her eyes sharp despite her 80 years. She examined Han Jun with the intensity of someone who had spent a lifetime reading character. "Sit," she commanded. Han Jun sat. "My granddaughter tells me you wish to make amends," Grandmother Adeyemi said. "That you did not fully understand what you had done until recently. That you have changed." "Yes, Ma." "Why should we believe you?" The question was delivered without hostility, simply a demand for truth. Han Jun considered his response carefully. He could offer explanations, justifications, descriptions of his mother's manipulation. But Nia had warned him. This woman respected honesty above all else. "You have no reason to believe me," he said finally. "I can only show you through my actions. I was absent when Nia needed me most. I failed to protect my family from forces I should have controlled. I caused pain that can never be fully erased." He met the grandmother's gaze directly. "But I am here now. I will continue to be here. And I will spend however long it takes proving that I am worthy of the family I abandoned." Silence filled the room. The elders exchanged glances, communicating in the wordless language of family. Grandmother Adeyemi studied him for a long moment. "Pretty words," she observed. "But words are easy. Anyone can speak them." "Yes, Ma." "You will stay for the full celebration. 3 days. During that time, you will participate in family activities. You will eat our food, join our conversations, answer our questions." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "And we will decide whether your words match your character." "I understand. See that you do." She gestured dismissively. "Emeka will show you to your quarters. The celebration begins tomorrow at sunrise. I suggest you rest. You will need your strength." The next 3 days tested Han Jun in ways he had never experienced. The family watched everything. When he helped carry chairs for a gathering, they observed his willingness to perform physical labor. When he joined conversations despite limited understanding of Yoruba, they noted his effort to engage. When children from the extended family approached him with curious questions about Korea, they assessed his patience and kindness. But the most significant tests involved Nia and the children. The family had arranged for Han Jun to participate in daily activities alongside them. Morning meals where generations gathered, afternoon excursions to local markets, evening storytelling sessions where elders shared family history. Through it all, Han Jun remained aware that he was being evaluated not just as an individual but as a potential family member. Every interaction with Nia was scrutinized for signs of genuine affection versus performance. Every moment with the children was assessed for evidence of paternal connection. On the second evening, Grandmother Adeyemi summoned him for a private conversation. They sat in her personal sitting room, a space filled with photographs spanning decades, textiles in brilliant colors, the accumulated treasures of a long life. "You love her," the grandmother said without preamble. It was not a question. "Yes," Han Jun replied. "And the children? You love them as well." "I am learning to. I missed their first 4 years. I cannot claim the same bond that develops from daily presence." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But yes, I love them. And I am committed to building the relationship I should have had from the beginning." Grandmother Adeyemi nodded slowly. "Love without knowledge is dangerous. You are wise to recognize that you are still learning." She was silent for a moment, her gaze distant with memory. "My husband died when our children were young," she said finally. "I raised them alone, 7 children, with no support except what I could create. It was difficult beyond description. But I did it because there was no alternative. Her eyes focused on Jun with renewed intensity. Nia did the same thing. She carried 3 children alone, built a business alone, survived alone, because the man who should have been beside her was not there. That kind of experience changes a woman forever. I understand. I don't think you do. Not fully. The grandmother leaned forward. You can never undo what happened. You can never give back the years she lost. But you can choose, every day, to be present now. To be reliable. To be the partner she should have had from the beginning. She reached out and gripped his hand with surprising strength. My granddaughter loves you still. She has tried not to, God knows she has tried, but the heart does not always obey reason. If you break her again, I will ensure that every door in every city closes to you. Do you understand? Yes, Ma. Good. She released his hand and settled back. The family will give you their blessing. But remember, blessings can be revoked. The final day of the celebration arrived with ceremonial grandeur. Grandmother Adeyemi's birthday was honored with feasting, dancing, speeches, and the kind of overwhelming family gathering that seemed to involve every relative within traveling distance. Jun participated in everything, guided by Emeka and increasingly accepted by the broader family. He ate dishes he could not name, danced badly but enthusiastically when pulled onto the floor, and answered countless questions about Korea with patient good humor. But the moment that changed everything came in the evening. The family had gathered in the central courtyard for the final blessing ceremony. Grandmother Adeyemi sat in a decorated chair, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Jun stood at the periphery, content to observe, until Nia approached and took his hand. Come, she said quietly. She led him through the gathered family toward her grandmother. The crowd parted to let them pass, their expressions ranging from curiosity to cautious approval. Before the grandmother, Nia stopped. Grandmother, she said formally, I present Jun, the father of my children. He has been absent, but he has returned. He has been distant, but he has drawn near. He has caused pain, but he seeks to heal. The formal language carried ceremonial weight. Jun understood that this was not simply an introduction. It was a request for acceptance, for recognition, for blessing. Grandmother Adeyemi studied them both with sharp assessment. You ask me to welcome this man into our family, she said. To accept him as one of us, despite everything that has passed. I do, grandmother. Why? The question hung in the air. Nia turned to look at Jun, really look at him, for the first time since they had arrived in Lagos. Because I see who he is becoming, she said softly. Because our children deserve a father. Because despite everything, despite every reason I have to refuse, her voice wavered slightly, because I still believe that the man I married is in there somewhere. And he's finally trying to find his way back. The words struck Jun with devastating force. 5 years of distance, and Nia still believed in him. Still saw possibility where he had created only failure. He did not deserve her faith. But he would spend the rest of his life earning it. Grandmother Adeyemi rose from her chair, slowly, with the dignity of her years, and approached them. She placed one hand on Nia's cheek and one on Jun's shoulder. Family is not built from perfection, she said, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. It is built from forgiveness, from persistence, from choosing every day to remain together despite the difficulties. She looked directly at Jun. You have been welcomed into our family tonight. Do not make us regret this choice. I won't, Ma. See that you don't. She returned to her chair, and the celebration resumed with renewed energy. But something fundamental had shifted. Jun stood among Nia's family, among his family now, and felt, for the first time in years, like he belonged somewhere. They returned to Seoul 3 days later. The children fell asleep on the flight, exhausted from the celebration. Nia sat beside Jun in the first-class cabin, watching them breathe softly in their seats. Thank you, Honjun said quietly, for giving me this chance. Nia was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of careful decision. The children need to know, she said, about who you are, what you are to them. They're old enough to understand the basics. Honjun's chest tightened. Are you certain? No. She smiled slightly, the first genuine smile she had offered him since his reappearance. But I'm certain that waiting longer won't make it easier. They deserve the truth. And you deserve the chance to be their father. She reached across the space between them and took his hand. It was the first time she had voluntarily touched him since the bakery. We tell them when we get home, she said. Together. The conversation happened 3 days after their return. Nia gathered the children in the living room of her apartment above the bakery, the space where they felt safest, surrounded by familiar things. Honjun sat across from them, his expression carefully controlled despite the nervous energy coursing through him. Children, Nia began, do you remember when I told you that your father was someone who isn't here? 3 heads nodded solemnly. I need to tell you something important. Something I should have told you a long time ago. She glanced at Honjun, drawing strength from his presence. Mr. Hon, the friend who has been visiting us. He isn't just a friend. She paused, choosing her words with maternal care. He's your father. The children's reactions varied. Seojun's expression shifted to thoughtful consideration, processing the information with his characteristic seriousness. Amora's eyes widened with surprise, then curiosity. Zara simply stared at Honjun with renewed intensity, as though seeing him for the first time. Our father? Seojun asked finally. The one who was missing? Yes. Where was he? The question was directed at Honjun. The boy's eyes held no accusation, only a child's straightforward demand for explanation. Honjun met his son's gaze directly. I made mistakes, he said honestly. I was not where I should have been when you were born. And afterward, circumstances kept us apart. But I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere. Did you want to be away? Amora asked, her voice small. No. Honjun's voice thickened with emotion he could not fully suppress. I never wanted to be away. I just didn't know how to find my way back. Until now. Zara, who had been silent throughout, suddenly climbed down from her seat and approached Honjun. She stood before him with the gravity of a child making an important decision. I put treasures on the table, she said. Did you keep them? Honjun understood instantly. This was her test, the final assessment from the daughter who observed everything. I kept every one, he said. They're in a special box in my home. Would you like to see them someday? Zara considered this for a long moment. Then she climbed onto his lap and settled there with casual determination. Okay, she said simply. You can be my daddy now. The remaining tension in the room dissolved. Amara scrambled over to join her sister, squeezing onto Honjun's lap with enthusiastic disregard for available space. Seojun remained in his seat for a moment longer, maintaining his dignity, before crossing the room and standing close enough for Honjun to rest a hand on his shoulder. Nia watched them from across the room, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. This was what they had lost. This was what they were beginning to reclaim. The months that followed were not without difficulty. Integrating Honjun into the children's lives required patience, adaptation, and occasional negotiation. There were days when they clung to him and days when they wanted only their mother. There were questions he could not answer and emotions he could not fix. But he remained present through all of it. He learned their rhythms: morning chaos before school, afternoon snacks at the bakery, bedtime routines that required specific stories told in specific orders. He discovered that Seojun responded best to logical explanations, that Amara needed physical affection and verbal affirmation, that Zara communicated through gifts and observations rather than words. He became their father. Not perfectly. Not without mistakes. But consistently, persistently, with the determined patience of a man who understood exactly what he had nearly lost. His relationship with Nia evolved more slowly. They shared meals, conversations, daily responsibilities. They made decisions together about the children's education, health, and well-being. They built the partnership that should have existed from the beginning. But the romantic dimension remained carefully guarded. Nia had been hurt too deeply to trust easily. Hon-jun understood this. He did not pressure her for physical affection or declarations of love. He simply showed up, day after day, demonstrating through action what words could not adequately convey. The breakthrough came on an ordinary Tuesday evening. The children were asleep. Nia and Hon-jun sat in her small living room, cups of tea cooling between them. The conversation had wandered through practical matters, school schedules, upcoming birthdays, a leak in the bakery ceiling, before drifting into silence. "I've been thinking," Nia said finally. "About what?" She set down her tea and looked at him directly. "About us. About what we were. What we might become." She paused, something vulnerable surfacing in her expression. "I spent 5 years convincing myself that loving you was a mistake, that trusting you again would only lead to more pain. And now I'm watching you with our children. Watching you keep your promises. Watching you become the man I always hoped you could be." She shook her head slightly. "And I'm running out of reasons to protect myself from feeling what I feel." Hon-jun's breath caught. "What do you feel?" Nia rose from her seat and crossed the small space between them. She stood before him, close enough to touch but still holding the final distance. "I love you," she said simply. "I never stopped. I tried. God knows I tried, but I couldn't make my heart listen to reason." Her voice trembled slightly. "The question is whether you can love me the way I need to be loved. Not through control or protection or provision. Through presence. Through partnership. Through staying, even when staying is hard." Hon-jun stood, bringing them face to face. "I can," he said. "I will. For as long as you let me." He raised his hand slowly, giving her time to retreat if she chose. She didn't move. His fingers touched her cheek, the first deliberate romantic contact they had shared in over 5 years. "I love you," he said. "I loved you when I married you. I loved you when I lost you. I have loved you through every mistake and every year of distance, even when I tried to convince myself otherwise." Nia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Then stay," she whispered. "Not because of the children or the obligation or the family name. Stay because you choose me. Because I am worth choosing. You have always been worth choosing." His voice broke slightly. "I was simply too blind to see it." She closed the remaining distance between them. The kiss that followed was not passionate or desperate. It was gentle, healing, a careful rebuilding of connection that had been shattered years before. It was a promise. 6 months later, they renewed their vows. The ceremony took place in a garden overlooking Seoul, with a small gathering of carefully chosen guests. Nia's family from Lagos, trusted friends from both their worlds, and the 3 children who had brought them back together. Nia wore a traditional Korean hanbok in white and gold, modified to incorporate Nigerian textile patterns in the accessories. Hon-jun wore a matching hanbok, his wrist tattoo visible as he held her hands during the ceremony. The children served as ring bearers and flower girls, their participation causing occasional chaos that the assembled guests found charming rather than disruptive. The vows they exchanged were simple and direct. "I promise to be present," Hon-jun said. "To choose you every day. To build a family worthy of the children we have been given. To remain, even when remaining is difficult." "I promise to forgive," Nia replied. "To trust, even when trust is frightening. To build a future that honors our past without being imprisoned by it. To love you as you are, while believing in who you are becoming." The ceremony concluded with traditional Korean bows and Nigerian prayers, a fusion of cultures that represented everything their family had become. As the sun set over Seoul, casting golden light across the gathered celebration, Jun and Nia stood together. Husband and wife, partners in truth, parents united in purpose. Their children played among the guests, secure in the knowledge that they were loved. Their families mingled with surprising harmony, bridging cultural differences through shared joy. And in the quiet moment when no one was watching, Jun leaned close to Nia's ear. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me the chance to come home." Nia squeezed his hand, her smile carrying 5 years of pain transformed into hope. "Thank you for finding your way back." The bakery remained in Bukshan Hanok village, though it expanded into the adjacent building as business grew. Jun continued running his organization, but with different priorities now. He delegated more, traveled less, and structured his schedule around family obligations rather than business opportunities. The children grew with the particular confidence of children who are deeply loved. Jun developed his father's observational intensity, applying it to academics rather than business strategy. Amara inherited her mother's warmth, filling every room she entered with music and laughter. Zara continued collecting treasures, her gifts growing more sophisticated as she learned to express affection through chosen objects. They visited Lagos regularly, maintaining connections that spanned continents. Grandmother Adeyemi lived to see the family fully reconciled. Her blessing proved valid by the joy that followed. And on quiet evenings, when the bakery was closed and the children were asleep, Jun and Nia would sit together in the apartment that had become their true home. Not the penthouse with its luxury finishes, but this simple space above the bakery, filled with the accumulated treasures of their rebuilt life. "Do you ever regret it?" Nia asked one night. "Everything you gave up to be here?" Jun considered the question seriously, as he did with everything she asked. "I gave up isolation disguised as power," he said finally. "I gave up a mother's control and a family's expectations. I gave up the belief that strength meant standing alone." He looked around the small room, at the children's artwork on the walls, the family photographs mixing Korean and Nigerian moments, the evidence of a life built from fragments of what they had lost. "What I gained," he continued, "is beyond comparison." Nia leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. "Then I don't regret it either," she said. "Any of it. Even the pain. Because it led us here." Outside, Seoul's lights glittered through the window. Inside, the family that had been broken and rebuilt slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they belonged to each other. Love had not simply survived the betrayal and separation. Love had transformed it. And in the end, that transformation was the greatest redemption of all. The end.